I started about 16 years ago in Washington State working with draft horses and mules. I joined a club and started to learn more and more about what the possibilities were for farming with animals, and it's become my life's passion since then. If your farm is of a certain scale, and scale is really important, if it's a scale that's doable with horses and mules, then they become very efficient. But the thing we have to be most honest about is how long things take. And if I did everything with a tractor, I could usually do it more quickly. And so there's the economics of time. There's the economics of either paying labor or how much time I have and how long it's going to take me to do something. And to do most jobs with horses will take longer than it would have to do it with a tractor. And that's where a lot of those kind of technologies came from, was in labor saving. Horses themselves cost a lot less than a tractor, and if you breed one of the horses, you may replace your horses without ever buying another one. And the price of fuel will continue to go up, as well it should, because it's going to become a scarce commodity. And one of the reasons that there's going to be a resurgence in farming with draft animals. Okay. Horses can cost anywhere from a few $100s to a couple $1,000s each. And some of that is a person's necessity, a person's preferences. The longer I get into it, the more money I spend on horses, partly because I'm developing more of an opinion of exactly what I like. I recommend that people look for horses with some experience. And that's not an absolute. It depends upon the experiences of the individual person. But often we find the youngest and the least experienced horses are often the cheapest. And when you're just starting out, it's important to find something that you will be successful with and comfortable with and happy with. And in the future, you'll have lots of opportunities to learn how to train horses and buy young horses that you can bring to your farm. You need to spend enough time with the horses and mules to keep them in training, to keep you and them working together, understanding each other, relating well. When you put a horse on pasture long enough, they start to get a little bit fuzzy about who's in charge and what we're here for and what the motivation is. And so you want to have enough work so that you're going to be hooking those horses up on a regular basis. The working life can vary considerably. They're big animals, and they tend to live into their 20s and 30 years old sometimes. Typically, they don't work that long. Typically, they work into their young 20s, and for my purposes, I'm going to retire horses in their late teens. That has to do with how much demand I place on them, how many days a week I need them and expect them to work, and how hard you expect them to work. So it varies depending on the type of farm you have and the expectations that you have for the horses. They're a particularly hardy animal. There will be some vet costs over the years, but as an overall part of your cost, it's going to be a small part. We experience a colic every couple years, and sometimes we call a vet for that. Sometimes we have a vet out for an abscess in a hoof. But when you add that up to all the costs over the course of a year, it's a small portion. Well, the first thing you're going to need is a place to house them. And if there are barns, there may be some remodeling required to make stalls or something else, but that's pretty economical. That's mostly a matter of buying a few $100s worth of lumber. To build a barn from scratch, you might want to build a barn that affords you the ability to put hay upstairs and horses downstairs. And that could cost $10,000 or $15,000 if you build it yourself, maybe more if you hire somebody else to build it. But there's lots of flexible ways. The animals don't need a lot of shelter. The animals can stay out in the winter. They prefer to stay out. They need a roof over their heads, some kind of shed. So it can be pretty rustic. Keeping one or two draft animals requires a few acres of pasture and some hay. And if you don't have to make the hay, if you buy the hay, you really only need 5 or 10 acres of pasture for those animals. Even the hay, which is one of the biggest expenses of owning a horse, is actually not as bad as it seems when you realize that you can turn that hay back into fertility in the form of compost and spread it back on your fields. If you buy all of your hay, then most farmers are not charging enough for hay. They're not including their cost of fertility. And so you're getting a good deal when you put that back on your fields. The equipment is pretty affordable to work with horses. There's a lot of equipment that was made for tractors that you can pull with horses and mules, and there's a lot of equipment that was made for horses and mules before tractors that works really well today. The cultivation and tillage equipment can be anywhere from going to auctions and spending $50 for each piece to buying a new cart with a motor on it that might cost a few $1,000s. Harnesses, again, that can range from buying used harnesses at auction for $100 for each horse to $400 or $500 per horse for new equipment. So we just actually have a wider diversity of equipment that's available to us, both old and new. And there's different ways that you can mix and match those to make the tools that you want. The other thing about some of this equipment is, take the mower just as an example. It's a very simple machine, and I don't really like complicated mechanics. I don't like the mechanics of cylinders and spark plugs and all those things. But half-inch bolts are pretty cool. If you put some oil on them and you get them off, then you can put new ones back and you fix the whole thing. And so it's actually pretty fun equipment to work on if you're a budding mechanic. The first thing that we want you to do when you're just getting into farming with horses is make sure you're ready before you go and bring them home. And to be ready, that means I'd like when they come home for them to have a job that you intend for them to do. And I want you to have the equipment there already and have the know-how of how to operate the equipment. Really, it doesn't have to be a complicated job. One of the best things for a new team to do with a new teamster is skid firewood. It's very simple. The equipment is simple. It's a chance for the person to learn the animals and the animal to learn the person. And then they can advance from that with more and more complicated equipment each time. I get a deep sense of personal satisfaction out of the time I spend working with the animals. So once I take that into the equation, then the horses and mules start to beat the tractor in almost every aspect of the farm.